Morning, everyone. Thanks, President Orb. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here today. It's a great spring day out there. We're enjoying some warm weather, obviously, especially down in the southwest. We're pretty much out of snow. This particular event, the chance to talk to you all a little bit about the direction of the province and also the bear pit that follows, is something we look forward to. There are actually not a lot of days in this job that I don't look forward to. I'm very, very grateful and humbled to have it. You've probably heard me say publicly that I think I've got the best job in Canada. I can tell you some of the senior staff have heard me say that often enough, and they're unhelpful and contrarian enough that they set out to prove me wrong, that I don't have the best job in Canada. In fact, they've found a lot of other Brad Walls in the world who have jobs to prove that I don't even have the best job amongst people named Brad Wall. There is a Brad Wall who is a pro bass fisherman in the United States. There is a Brad Wall who's a reasonably successful mixed martial arts fighter. I don't know how you can be reasonably successful at that, by the way. There's Brad Wall, who is a pro golfer in Australia. And then they found recently an article in the Wall Street Journal about another Brad Wall, who is the Vice President of Supply Chain, Logistics, and Quality Control for Krispy Kreme donuts. That Brad Wall is paid $1 million a year. Part of his job is to travel the United States and make sure that the logistics for donut sales is happening smoothly. Part of his job is, in quality of control, is to eat donuts. So when I read that, I joined about 30% or so of the population of our province in being one of the people who doesn't like Brad Wall either. I want to thank Ray for his leadership at SARM here lately, and I know there may or may not be an election, but we appreciate the chance to have worked with you and colleagues. Just before I get into my remarks this morning, I do want to say a thank you to your former president, to Dave Merritt, who served 15 years on SARM's board, including 8 as your president, and with whom we've had a great working relationship. It's been a professional relationship that I've personally had with Dave, because on a personal level, I don't care for him. Dave, as many of you will know, likes to trash talk, and Dave will show up at our events sometimes, at political meetings, not always political meetings, sometimes any event, and he's quite a heckler, and takes some pretty gratuitous shots at me, fairly personal shots at me on a regular basis. And so I am looking forward to the day when he's successful in his next endeavor and joins our caucus, my caucus. As you know, though, Dave's been around a very long time. And so you'd think that we would know everything there is to know about Dave, but I found some new things out in preparing for these remarks, including the fact that Dave's a left-winger. It's true, according to the hockey database website, Dave was a left-winger for the Moose Jaw Canucks in the SJ. Long before the Moose Jaw Warriors were around, long before goalie masks, and long before helmets. That's pretty clear if you've talked to Dave. But the record goes on to show that in 1973-74 season, when I was in about grade 3, Dave, in that season, Dave Merritt collected 151 penalty minutes while serving as captain of the Moose Jaw Canucks. That's 151 penalty minutes in 40 games. He also found a bit of time to score in between fighting. He collected 36 points in those 40 games, including 17 goals. So that is pretty impressive. That's quite a career. And captain, obviously a leader on the team. And I bet you had some pretty good line mates. Well, I want you to know that in terms of Ryder and Stewart, the quality of your line mates is about to go down a little bit in your next career. Ladies and gentlemen, many of you will know that the Prime Minister of this country is writing a book about hockey. This is pretty interesting for Dave, I think, because his book about hockey apparently is not just about players that went on to play at the pro level, to play in the NHL. There is a lot of attention in the book to others who were journeymen in amateur hockey and had reasonably good careers and who deserve a worthy mention. And I want you to know today that in the Prime Minister's book, there's absolutely no mention of Dave Merritt. It is a pleasure to be with you here this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk a little bit about the budget that's upcoming just next week. I know we're going to have bear pit questions on budget issues and other things, but I want to share with you a few thoughts on the budget. I'd also like to talk to you a little bit about the state of the economy in our province, why I'm optimistic and why I think you should be optimistic for the short and the mid and certainly for the long-term economic prospects of the province that we love. When I was here last, West Texas Intermediate was about $98 a barrel. Today, I think this morning I checked, it's about $49. Ken Crevette says it's $47 today. The speech is getting a lot shorter. So obviously, this is a significant drop, more or less cut in half from where we were a year ago. So how does this impact the provincial budget? Well, the impact is significant. The impact is between $600 and $800 million less in revenue to the government, between 5% and 7% reduction in revenue for Saskatchewan. Now, a revenue decline of this magnitude won't bring the operations of government to a halt, but it is serious, and it needs to be addressed, and it will be addressed. You will know this as local leaders, as reeves and councillors. You will know that there's no outcry on the part of your ratepayers or our citizens for less service. Groups and individuals would like more from their government. Governments would like to respond and provide more for the government. So that pressure is still there, but the backdrop, of course, is less revenue, a revenue squeeze. That's why we've taken some, I hope, exemplary steps in terms of a wage freeze for MLAs. We've also frozen the wages of those who are out-of-scope managers in the government, and that extends to the Crown sector. We've asked our third-party partners and school divisions and universities to do the same, and I want to thank them, those ones that have responded to lead from the front, as it were. And I know at the local level, you've been taking steps to make sure your own fiscal house is in order through this short-term period of revenue decline due to falling oil prices. This environment, though, has caused us, through the budget process, to make sure that everything is on the table. Everything has to be on the table as we work towards a balanced budget for the province of Saskatchewan. A balanced budget in our province isn't just an annual thing we want to achieve. It's not just an important goal each year. It's part of our long-term growth plan. Fiscal probity is the cornerstone of our growth plan for the province. We want to make sure we're paying our bills as we go, that we never have to borrow for the operations of government. And so in that context, we've had to make sure that everything else is on the table. Every program, every expenditure must be reviewed, and that includes revenue sharing. You will know, delegates, that revenue sharing has jumped in our province by more than 100% during our time in office, while overall government revenues have increased by just over 20%. So there's a bit of a disconnect there, because we had agreed, the municipal level of leadership and the provincial level of leadership had agreed years ago that revenue sharing should follow along government's own source revenue. The revenue that the provincial government collects should be reflected in terms of how much is shared in terms of operating grants to municipalities. And we see now that 100% increase in revenue sharing far outstrips the own source revenue increases to the province of Saskatchewan. Having said that, know this, delegates, that our MLAs and our ministers throughout this budget process have emphasized that revenue sharing has worked well for Saskatchewan. This new system that we've agreed on together, where basically the equivalent of 1 point on the PST is the revenue sharing mechanism and provided to municipalities, that has worked well. There's a stability in that formula. There is something consistent about that, upon which you can predictably plan for the future. And these were the principles we were striving to achieve when we developed the new revenue sharing model. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, that this consideration of any change at all to revenue sharing has been and is the very, very last resort of the government, because we value this partnership and we understand the effectiveness of that particular way of sharing revenues with our local governments and local leaders. But it has been on the table. The other consideration that we've been looking at in terms of revenue measures for the government that would be very important to this group is on education property tax. As you will know, before our government took office, 60% of the education costs in Saskatchewan were borne by property owners. About 40% came from the general revenues of government. And there were at the time some rebate programs, but fundamentally we had a 60-40 split in Saskatchewan, 60 from all of you and your ratepayers and 40% from the government. It was the wrong balance. It was wrong then, it would be wrong today. And we also know that there was a disproportionate pressure on farmland. That was wrong then, and any return to that would be wrong today. Our goal was always that we might reverse that split in terms of a long-term solution, that rather than it be 60-40, obviously it would be 40-60, with 40% coming from ratepayers, from property, and 60% coming from the government. We started this in 2009, as you will know, and by 2010 we had delivered the largest education property tax reduction in the history of Saskatchewan, including a 75 to 80% reduction in property taxes on farmland. And even through reassessment, we sought to neutralize reassessment so there wasn't an unintended tax grab from the provincial government. 5 years later, after that change in 2010, education property tax levels, or the manner in which we collect them through the formula, remains the same, notwithstanding assessment. But as you can imagine, as you know, because of where you live, education costs have gone up during those 5 years. There are more teachers working in the province. Their salaries have increased. We're building schools as we should. And as a result, the balance is now closer to 2/3, 1/3, with close to 2/3 of growing education costs being picked up directly by the province. We will never, ever go back to the days of that old 60-40 split. But we have been looking as a government at the need to ensure that EPT rates are adjusted to the reality of growing education costs. They've been frozen now for a number of years, and we've had to at least consider this. This has been on the table. I think for our government going forward, what we would always want to ensure is that 40-60 split, 40 from property and 60 from government is something that's enshrined. It's something that's permanent. But some adjustment has been on the table, and we've looked at it, and we'll see in just a few days, in about a week from now, as to the final decisions the government has made. Education property tax is also, like revenue sharing, is a crucial issue for us, especially as regards the relationship that we have with you. This isn't just an annual relationship that we have with an organization. The relationship that we have with SARM is a partnership. It's a partnership in every sense of the words. You help deliver and administer programs for the province. It's a partnership that doesn't preclude the fact that with individual municipalities and regions we're going to have disagreements, or RMs are going to want and expect more from the government and hold us accountable, and that's the way it should be. But on the big issues, this partnership has been strong, and it's been effective. It's how we've been able to handle new programs for pest and predator control. It's how we've been able to work together with the plan to repatriate the agri-stability program from Manitoba to Melville. It's how we've worked together towards crop insurance improvements in the province, in the province of Saskatchewan. It's how the government's been able to react to a demand for a personal care home benefit increase. We heard that here at SARM. health ministers at Bear Pits would hear from many of you and the RMs that were involved in these homes that we needed to benefit. You saw us campaign on it in the last election and deliver on it. It came from this partnership. It came from this relationship. It's why we've been able to respond, and you would say you need more, and I understand that, but it's why we've been able to respond on the infrastructure issue as well. The partnership has afforded a broader and more aggressive approach to doctor recruitment, rural doctor recruitment, and I'll talk more about that a little bit later. The partnership that we have with SARM means a lot to the government because it represents a partnership with rural Saskatchewan, with that part of our province that is driving so much growth, that has needed some attention from government after an infrastructure deficit built up over years and years. And so this has informed our budget deliberations. That partnership and the relationship that we have and want to continue to have with rural Saskatchewan has informed the decisions that we've made, and I will tell you today, it will be a balanced budget. We will table another balanced budget in Saskatchewan, and we will meet these short-term challenges, and we will do so in a way that I hope you will support and understand when you see it in a few days. I want to point something else out if I can, delegates. The budget's one thing. There's certainly some current and temporary challenges in the budget as a result of the price of oil, but what we've seen in the province of Saskatchewan over the last number of years is a delinking of the budget of the government of Saskatchewan and the economy of the province of Saskatchewan. In fact, we saw it first in Technicolor, really, in 2009. In 2009, the price of oil actually fell to a much lower point than it is today. I think it touched about $35 a barrel for a bit. It stayed very, very low. And in that year, we also had the complication of a near collapse in potash sales. That was a very difficult year. We have been through this before. We've been through it together, and from a certain perspective, it was much worse. In fact, I think I saw Rod Gannifor here. He's with STARS. Rod was the finance minister at the time, and I remember a meeting he had with me in the office. He came in, we were dealing with no oil revenue, and there wasn't much potash sales happening, and he came in and he said, I'd like to have a meeting with you about potash. And I said, oh, okay, let's do that. He said, you know, due to an anomaly in the potash royalty system that we've inherited, not only will we really not collect much in the way of royalties from the potash companies, but we actually owe them money. And I said, well, that really sucks. That's terrible. That's not good. That's the challenge that we faced in 2009. What happened then in that year? This province responded to the challenge. We kept the books balanced. The population grew. There were more jobs created by your ratepayers, by small business women and men across this province, by the resource sector. This economy, this province grew, notwithstanding the fact that the provincial budget was in some trouble. It's a good indication that these things are delinked, that they're not necessarily the same. Today, I think we're in a better position. Today we have revenue concerns on the oil side. Potash, though, you've seen some strength, and a great announcement by Mosaic for K3 at Esterhazy, a $1.7 billion investment announced on Monday. That is an indication that we're more than just oil, that we have an increasingly diversified economy. We see strength in manufacturing. We see it in the trade sector and in financial services. This should give us some considerable optimism about the economy continuing to grow, not at perhaps the rate it has, but growth, as other forecasters have indicated, will happen even in this current energy situation that we find ourselves. We should also be optimistic today about the economy, notwithstanding the budget, because of agriculture, because of the strength of agriculture in this province. There was a premier who years ago used to talk about mega projects in Saskatchewan. He would talk about the industrial mega projects, but he would remind all of us that we are very fortunate in Saskatchewan to have, and by the way, mega projects are something governments like to see happen. We like to see $1.7 billion worth of investment in any particular project. But he would remind all of us that we are lucky in Saskatchewan because your ratepayers provide for Saskatchewan 2 mega projects every single year: seeding and harvest. $4.5 billion spent on that mega project in 2014 on the seeding project, and $1.1 billion mega project in harvest last year. Two huge injections into our economy that we ought never to take for granted. For a while in this province, we didn't talk much about agriculture, even though we have 45% of the arable acres in all of the Dominion of Canada. That's changing now, I hope. I hope you see it a change from the government's perspective. Saskatchewan's status as a world leader in agriculture was confirmed again last month when the 2014 export numbers were released. We reclaimed the title as Canada's leading food exporter, surpassing Ontario. We've been in a battle with Ontario. You know, they will move ahead and then we'll catch up and they'll move ahead, and they get equalization payments. So there's, mind you, they got the Toronto Maple Leafs, so it all balances out in the end, right, Ken? We shipped a record $13.9 billion worth of agri-food products in 2014. That is 25% of Canada's total. Your ratepayers, ladies and gentlemen. We have a diversity of markets for our agricultural products. 15 countries bought at least $200 million worth of Saskatchewan agri-product from us last year. And we are strong, very strong, in the fastest growing markets on the planet, in Asia. As for our part, as a government, we are going to do whatever we can to work with you, to listen to you, and listen to producers to make sure, and processors, to make sure we, as a government, are doing the things that can assist this sector of the economy to reach its full potential, to continue to create economic momentum and new jobs in Saskatchewan. And I hope you have seen a demonstrated support for agriculture through international engagement. I hope you've seen in our government one like no other in terms of telling our story, trying to open up those markets in Asia, in those fast-growing countries where they want greater protein intensity and they want more of what we have to offer. I hope you've seen our commitment through agriculture, through that education property tax reduction, the largest in the province's history, through improvements to crop insurance, through support for agriculture research, by spending more on research than we've ever seen in the province, $25 million since 2007 compared to $3.1 million during the last 7 years of the previous government. Research investment is not always the easiest thing for government to do, because there's no immediate payback. There's not really a ribbon to cut, is there? It's a long-term proposition, but it is essential and it is vital if we are to maintain the leadership position we have, not just in this country, but in the world in agriculture. And even in a tight budget, you're going to see us maintain that commitment to agricultural research. I hope you have seen us as a government standing up for agricultural interests, whether it was the issue of transportation that we had last year and frankly still have today with the railways and our input into the Canadian Transportation Act review and work with the federal government. But also in things like trade disputes that we have sometimes within Canada. You know, we have lots of trade barriers within our own country. And our oilseed producers were facing a trade barrier from Quebec, restrictions on our products moving into that market. And last month we won the final appeal of a successful challenge, and that matter is now resolved. We need to continue, all of us, to stand up for this sector, to talk frankly more about it, to work to open up new markets, to support it because of the powerful economic engine it is, especially at a time when diversity in our economy is as important as it ever was. Today our economy has tremendous momentum, ladies and gentlemen, not just for reasons of agricultural strength, though. We have the second lowest unemployment rate in the country. Capital investment has surpassed, hear this now, $20 billion for 3 consecutive years, about double the 2007 total. In 2014, we saw new records in exports, manufacturing shipments, and wholesale trade, remembering in that last quarter there was a softening in the price of oil. This is not just my opinion, by the way. This is the opinion of experts, of economists. Benjamin Tell, the chief economist for CIBC World Markets, said this in January, quote, putting Alberta and Saskatchewan in the same basket is wrong, because the situation here in Saskatchewan is different. Yes, absolutely, there will be a negative impact coming from the oil sector. But if you look at the structure of the economy in Saskatchewan, it is very different than the structure of the economy in Alberta. You still have agriculture, you still have potash, and there is some manufacturing. So what then can we as a government do in this budget and in the months ahead to keep Saskatchewan moving forward, to continue to build on the Saskatchewan advantage? What's our role? Well, we don't believe the role of the government is to create the jobs. I think you've heard me say that many times before. Our job is to create the right environment, to facilitate the right business climate, so that your ratepayer, so that the business sector in this province has the economic freedom and the opportunity to create those jobs, and we're going to continue to do that. We're going to continue to do that by keeping true to the principles of the growth plan we've campaigned on in 2 elections, this growth plan that is the North Star reference point for our government. We're going to do it by keeping our taxes competitive. We're going to do it by encouraging continued infrastructure investment in the province. In the past, in Saskatchewan, when there would be a difficult budget, if you take a look at the history, if you go back through public accounts and the budget documents, governments at a time like this would withdraw from infrastructure investment. And you know, and I know, the infrastructure deficit in this province that has been the result, one that we are not yet finished dealing with, as you know. There's a lot more work to do out there in roads and highways and school infrastructure and healthcare infrastructure. Because for a season in the life of this province, whenever there would be a fiscal challenge, we just stop building. We're not going to do that in this budget. This is a temporary issue around the price of oil, whether it's a couple months or 18 months. It's not the long-term reality for the province, and so we can't let a short-term challenge cause us to make short-term decisions. We need to continue to have a long view. You will also see in the budget some specific tools that I hope you can actually use in attracting investment. In the throne speech, we talked about implementing new growth tax incentives to see new jobs created in manufacturing and processing and in a corporate office presence, in the corporate sector. You're going to see in the budget very, very specific tools where we think we can attract more jobs in manufacturing and agricultural processing, and also attracting companies to expand their corporate office presence here in the province. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, soon after that budget, you might see some companies immediately taking advantage of that and expanding here in the province. This is a commitment we made in the throne speech, and you'll see it in the budget. It is part of our plan to try to keep things moving, to keep the province going forward, to keep Saskatchewan in leadership as it is today. Our objective in this budget is to sustain growth, but not for its own sake, as you've also heard me say many times before. That's not why we want the province to grow, for the purposes of GDP statistics and reports from economists. We want the province to grow so that we can continue to improve and invest in the quality of life, so that we have a tax base from which we can support those who are most vulnerable, so that we have a tax base from which we can spend more on infrastructure, provide the quality of services that people deserve and they want, so that we can invest in projects like collaborative emergency centers in rural Saskatchewan, facilities that are improving access to care and shortening wait times. 3 CECs are now operating in the province, in Maidstone, Shaunavon, and in Kenora. 2 more will open in the months ahead in Spiritwood and Waka. That's why we want growth. We want growth so we can continue to provide more training spaces for doctors, and a brand new program like SIPA to attract and pay for new doctors to rural Saskatchewan. 160 doctors have been deployed as a result of that program across the province, and of course many of them in rural areas. We want growth so that we can support STARS, so that we can provide that emergency care, that flying emergency room right across the province, regardless of where people live. It costs money from a provincial standpoint, and that's why we desire growth. Ladies and gentlemen, 2 years ago, the Carlisle Observer invited people to respond to a question on its Facebook page. The question was, why do young people choose to stay in Saskatchewan? I want to tell you about a young woman who replied to that posting. Her name is Laura Olson. She was 21 at the time. And this is what she wrote. Quote, I belong in Saskatchewan. I love everything that is here. The open prairie, the people, the sky. I love small towns and agriculture. I just can't see myself living anywhere else. I don't think it would be as peaceful or feel like home. I want to raise a family in Saskatchewan so my children can grow up with the same good roots. For years in this province, may we never ever forget that this was the unrequited dream of so many of our young people. To stay at home, to be near the people they love, to start their family here, and then to have that family stay here. But they couldn't always. To get ahead, to build a life, to do well for their family, sometimes too many had to leave. My brother's in Clare's home, well, now Lethbridge, Alberta today. Many of my friends went to Calgary after they graduated university. Things have changed. You have caused a change in this province. You have demanded, I think, a change in this province. And 2 years on, Laura Olson is still here. She's 23 now. She's a laboratory and x-ray technician engaged to a young rancher who moved to Saskatchewan from Alberta. Laura and Graham Anderson, her new name, are running 1,100 head of cattle near Tompkins in the southwest, and they're going to get married in August. Today, Laura is where she belongs, where she wants to be, here in Saskatchewan, putting down roots and starting a family. There are some commercials on the television today from a political organization in the province asking the question, where did the money go? Ladies and gentlemen, we're happy to try to answer that question. $3 billion in debt repayment. That's where the money went. Record tax reductions in the province. That's where the money went. $6 billion in infrastructure investments across this province over the last 7 years compared to $3 billion in the 7 years that preceded our government. That's where the money went. 400 more doctors practicing in Saskatchewan. That's where the money went. 2,600 more nurses of every designation working across this province. That's where the money went. A surgical wait times initiative that can cost between $70 and $100 million each and every year to take us from the longest surgical waiting lists in the country to the shortest ones in the country. That's where the money went. Getting close to an election, isn't it? I want to say, this, in all of these areas, there's more work to be done. Our government's made its share of mistakes. In every one of these areas, there is more to do. But make no mistake, there's an answer to the question where the money went, and more importantly, we are no longer asking the question we used to ask in this province, which was, where did all the kids go? Because they're in Tompkins, and they're in Carlisle, and in this city of Saskatoon, and Regina, and right across this province, 53,000 of them applying for our graduate retention program because there was a job here to stay, to work towards. There was a life to build here. This is the business we need to be about in the province. We'll face these short-term challenges, but we will not let a 2-month or 6-month or 18-month dip in the price of oil distract us from our objective, from our goal, which is to see continued growth for all the right reasons, for what that growth will pay for and what this province will become because of it. I thank you for your leadership in this task, but we still have lots of work to do. Thanks for the chance to be here today.